Man saves Jaguar from cliff, what it does next. David Thompson held back tears as adrenaline still coursed through his veins. It had been an ordinary workday until he spotted the magnificent Jaguar clinging to a crevice on that cliff, caught between life and oblivion in Blue Ridge National Park. That's when everything changed. David lunged toward the cliff's edge, ignoring the danger, reaching out to the struggling animal. Their eyes met. His, determined; the Jaguar's, frightened yet strangely aware. In that moment, an inexplicable connection formed between them. "Easy, girl. Easy," he whispered, feeling the weight of the big cat as its paws gripped his arm. David didn't hesitate. Using all his strength and his experience as a wildlife veterinarian, he pulled the animal up to safety. Sweat dripped down his face as his muscles screamed in protest. The Jaguar, weighing over 130 pounds, stared at him without attacking, as if understanding it was being saved. When he finally brought the animal to the safe plateau, David collapsed onto his back, exhausted. To his surprise, the Jaguar didn't run. It stood a few yards away, watching him with those piercing golden eyes, as if trying to decipher the man who had just risked his life for it. "You're safe now," David said, more to himself than to the Jaguar. "You can go." The Jaguar took a few hesitant steps back, never turning away, before finally disappearing into the brush of the Texas hill country. David lay there for several minutes, catching his breath and trying to process what had just happened. What he didn't know was that this encounter would change his life forever. 3 days later, David was still thinking about the incident as he organized files in his veterinary clinic in Riverdale, a small town at the foot of Blue Ridge. The modest but well-equipped office had been his refuge since returning from New York City after his painful divorce from Jennifer 5 years earlier. "Dr. Thompson, Mr. Richard Blackwood is on the line," announced Ruth, his 63-year-old secretary and assistant, whose energy made her seem 40. "This is the third time he's called today." David sighed heavily. Richard Blackwood was the most influential businessman in the region, owning half the land around the national park. A 55-year-old man with graying hair and a ruthless vision of progress that had turned several natural areas into luxury developments. "Tell him I'm busy, Ruth. I have an emergency with a horse at Miller's Ranch. He already knows you're here. He says it's urgent, about the land at Frontier Canyon." David's stomach tightened. Frontier Canyon was exactly where he had saved the Jaguar, an area technically on the park's border, but which Richard claimed as part of his property. "Fine," David relented. "Put him through." Ruth transferred the call and David took a deep breath before answering. Thompson speaking. "David, my friend." Richard's deep, artificially friendly voice came through the line. "We need to talk about something that'll interest us both." "I've got a full schedule, Richard. Can you be direct? I heard you were doing some climbing on my land at Frontier Canyon, and from what I've been told, you weren't alone." A chill ran down David's spine. How could Richard know? "I was doing my job, a wildlife survey for the EPA's biannual report, and that area is a park buffer zone, not your private property." A dry laugh came from the other end. "Always the nature defender, aren't you? Listen, I'm offering something good for both of us. I'm starting construction on the Royal Frontier Lodge in that area. A multi-million-dollar investment that will turn Riverdale into an international tourist destination. And I need a consulting veterinarian to ensure we're following all the, what do you call them, best environmental practices." David clenched the phone tightly. "You can't build there. It's the habitat of endangered species, including a Jaguar. That which you heroically saved, right?" Richard interrupted. "Yes, my security guard saw it all from a distance. Impressive, I must say. But look, that's exactly the kind of story we can use in the resort's marketing. Stay where man and nature meet." "What do you think?" Indignation swelled inside David. How could that man turn even a pure moment into a business opportunity? "I'm not interested, Richard, and I'll do everything I can to stop this construction." There was a moment of silence on the other end. "It would be a shame to drag your ex-wife into this, don't you think?" Richard's voice turned colder. "Jennifer has been an excellent partner at City Hall, as the mayor's advisor. Or should I say as the mayor's fiancée. David felt as if he'd been punched. Jennifer and Gregory, the mayor? She had returned to Riverdale without even telling him. "Leave Jennifer out of this," David said, trying not to show his surprise. "We'll talk later then. Oh, and I heard your daughter is coming to stay with you for vacation. Emily, right? After how many years without seeing her? 3? 4? Without waiting for a reply, Richard hung up, leaving David holding the phone with a sense of vulnerability he hadn't felt in a long time. Ruth gently knocked on the door and entered, her weathered face lined with concern. "Everything all right, Doctor?" David forced a smile. "Yes, Ruth, just Richard being Richard." He hesitated for a moment. "Did you know Jennifer is in town?" Ruth lowered her gaze, clearly uncomfortable. "Yes, Doctor. She's been here about 2 months. I thought you knew." "And she's with the mayor." "The engagement was announced at the Spring Festival last month. Everyone talked about it, but no one had the heart to tell you." David nodded, trying to process the information. 5 years ago, he and Jennifer had separated after nearly 20 years of marriage. His obsession with work, the long expeditions, the way animals always seemed to come before family, it had all created a rift between them, and the most painful consequence was losing touch with Emily, who chose to live with her mother in New York City. "And did you know Emily is coming here? Mrs. Jennifer called me yesterday. She asked me to prepare Emily's room at your house. She arrives tomorrow on the 10 a.m. bus." Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, don't forget to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps us newcomers. Now back to the story as David rubbed his face, trying to gather his thoughts. Seeing his daughter after so long, dealing with Jennifer's presence in town, facing Richard, and his destructive project, all at once felt overwhelming. But something even more urgent weighed on his mind: the Jaguar. That night, after closing the clinic, David drove his worn-out pickup to his home on the outskirts of town. The small 2-acre property with its modest 2-bedroom house was surrounded by native vegetation he made sure to preserve, a perfect retreat for someone who valued the company of animals more than people. As he parked on the dirt driveway, something caught his attention. At the edge of the property, between the trees, 2 golden eyes reflected the headlights. David froze, hands still on the wheel. It was her. The Jaguar had followed his scent, all the way here, over 9 miles from where he'd saved her. Slowly, David turned off the engine but kept the headlights on. He stepped out of the car and stood still, watching the animal that watched him back. "You followed me," he murmured, disbelieving. As if in response, the Jaguar took a step forward, partly emerging from the shadows. That was when David noticed. It was limping. Its right front paw barely touched the ground. During the rescue, he had been so focused on saving it from the cliff that he hadn't realized it was already injured. The veterinarian in him took over. "You're hurt, aren't you? That's why you couldn't get off the cliff by yourself." The Jaguar made a low sound, almost a whimper, and took another hesitant step. "I can't believe what I'm about to do," David said, quickly heading inside. He returned minutes later with a piece of raw meat and a veterinary kit. He placed the meat on the ground at a safe distance and stepped back. The Jaguar looked at the meat, then at David, as if weighing the risk. Slowly it approached, keeping its eyes on him the whole time. It devoured the meat in large bites. "That's it, good girl, I need to take a look at that paw." To his surprise, when he took a cautious step toward the animal, it didn't retreat. It was as if, in some impossible way, it trusted him. Teeny V moved closer, speaking softly until he was just a few feet away. Now in the headlights, he could see the wound better, a deep cut, possibly from a trap. "Is that what happened? Did someone set a trap in your territory? Probably Richard's men clearing the land for construction." Anger swelled in his chest again. This was illegal on so many levels he could hardly count. Traps were forbidden, especially so close to a national park. The Jaguar finished eating and stared at him, as if waiting for something. David opened his kit, slow and careful, and prepared a syringe with antibiotics and painkillers. "I know you won't like this, but I need to treat that wound, trust me, as if it were a house cat, and not one of the most powerful predators in the United States. The Jaguar stayed still while David, with extreme care, administered the injection. It flinched slightly at the needle, but didn't attack. Then he managed to clean the wound superficially and apply an antibiotic spray. "This'll help for now, but I'll need to do better tomorrow." He rose slowly, avoiding sudden movements, and backed toward the house. The Jaguar watched him retreat and, to his complete surprise, followed him to the porch where it finally stopped and lay down. "You can't stay here," David said, though he knew he was speaking more to himself than to the animal. "If someone sees you—" But looking into those golden eyes, at the inexplicable trust the animal placed in him, he couldn't finish the sentence. He was fully aware of the absurdity of the situation, a veterinarian sheltering an injured jaguar on his property. It could cost him his license, maybe even his freedom. Yet in that moment all that mattered was that this magnificent creature needed him, and somehow, maybe he needed it too. Just for tonight, he finally decided. Tomorrow, we'll figure something out. Going inside, David glanced out the window one last time. The jaguar lay on the porch, licking its wounded paw as if it were its own territory, and in a way, perhaps it was. The next morning, David woke with a start at the sound of an approaching car, the Jaguar. He rushed to the front window, dreading what he might find. To his relief and surprise, the porch was empty. The animal had vanished overnight. Hastily straightening his clothes, he opened the door to find Jennifer stepping out of a luxury car. The sight of his ex-wife after 5 years hit him like an electric shock. Jennifer Parker Thompson, at 43, remained as elegant as ever, her once-long black hair now shorter with a few silver streaks that only enhanced her mature beauty. She wore a casual yet clearly expensive dress, a far cry from the simple clothes she used to wear when they were married. Beside her, stepping out of the back seat of the car, was Emily. David felt a lump in his throat. His daughter was no longer the 13-year-old teenager who had bid him farewell with tears in her eyes. Now, at 18, she was a young woman with her mother's dark eyes but his own wavy brown hair. "Dad," said Emily, her voice sounding strangely grown up to David's ears. "Em," was all he managed to say, feeling tears threatening to surface. Jennifer kept a calculated distance. "David, how are you?" Her tone was polite but cold, as if speaking to a distant acquaintance, not the man she had shared 2 decades of life with. "Fine." Surprised, but fine. He looked directly at his ex-wife. "Why didn't you tell me you were in town?" Jennifer raised her eyebrows. "I thought you knew. This town isn't exactly New York City." Emily intervened, clearly uncomfortable. With the tension between her parents. "Mom, you said you told Dad I was coming." "And I did, sweetheart. I asked Mrs. Eleanor to prepare your room." Jennifer adjusted the strap of her purse on her shoulder. "David, Emily will be staying with you for a month as we discussed over email." "Email?" David frowned, confused. Jennifer sighed impatiently. "I sent 3 emails in the last few weeks. If you didn't read them, that's not my fault. Still buried in work, I see. Some things never change." Emily stepped in again. "It's okay, Mum. Dad and I will figure it out." Jennifer nodded and kissed her daughter's forehead. "Gregory is waiting for me at City Hall. We have an important meeting today." She gave David a pointed look. "About the new resort." "Richard's resort," said David, not as a question but as an accusation. "It's a big step forward for Riverdale, David. It'll bring jobs, tourism, development. But I suppose you only see the downside, as usual." Emily glanced between them, clearly embarrassed. "Mom, weren't you going to help me with my bags?" Jennifer checked her watch. "I'm running late, sweetheart. I'm sure your father can handle it." She smiled at her daughter, then turned back to David with a serious expression. "We'll talk later. Gregory is hosting a dinner to officially introduce Emily to the local community. I expect you'll be there." Without waiting for a reply, Jennifer got into the car and drove off, leaving father and daughter alone, surrounded by an awkward silence and 5 years of absence. "So," Emily began hesitantly. "Let's go inside," said David, forcing a smile. "Let me help with your bags." As he carried the luggage inside, David couldn't stop thinking about everything that was happening. Jennifer engaged to the mayor involved in the resort project, Emily back home. and a wounded jaguar that for some inexplicable reason had chosen him as its protector. Entering the house, Emily looked around curiously. It's different than I imagined, more cozy. David felt a pang in his chest, remembering his own daughter had never been to his home before. It's nothing fancy, but it suits me. It has a peculiar smell, and she remarked, sniffing the air, like a zoo, but more wild. David swallowed hard, thinking of the jaguar on the porch. I work with wild animals. The smell tends to follow me. He set her bags down in the room he'd prepared for Emily and showed her the rest of the house. The simple living room with shelves full of books on veterinary medicine and wildlife, the modest but functional kitchen, the small office where he spent hours studying and writing reports. "Where is your lab?" asked Emily. "My lab?" "Yes, where you do your research, your studies with the animals. Mom always said you'd rather spend time in the lab than with us." David sighed. "I don't have a lab here, Em. I mostly work at the clinic in town and do field research in the park." Emily looked confused, but Mom said, "Your mother and I see many things differently," David interrupted gently, "including my work." An uncomfortable silence fell between them again, until Emily pointed to a mark on the floor near the porch door. "What's that? It looks like blood?" David turned quickly, spotting the small red trail the jaguar had left the night before. "Oh, that. I had an emergency last night. An injured dog. Must have stepped in the blood without realizing." Emily stared at him with an expression he couldn't read. Did she believe him? Or was she already starting her stay with suspicion? Toward her father. Before he could think further, the phone rang. It was Ruth. "Dr. Thompson, there's an emergency. Mrs. Betty from the Wildflower Retreat found a young manned wolf pup with its paw caught in a trap. She's frantic." "I'm on my way," David replied automatically. Hanging up, he saw Emily watching him with a look he knew well, the same one Jennifer used to give him when he had to leave for emergencies during their marriage. "I'm sorry, Em. It's an emergency. A hurt pup." To his surprise, Emily shrugged. "Can I come? I've always wanted to see you work." David blinked, stunned. This wasn't the reaction he'd expected. "Of course, if you want, but I warn you, it might be upsetting." "I'm studying biology, Dad. I've seen upsetting things in the lab." Another shock. His daughter was studying biology. Jennifer had never mentioned that in their rare communications over the years. Minutes later, they were in the pickup truck on the way to Mrs. Betty's retreat. David drove in silence, trying to process everything, while Emily gazed out the window, taking in the Texas hill country. "It's pretty here," she finally said. "Different from New York City. That's why I chose to stay. After your mother and you left, I thought about going back to the city, but I couldn't. This place," he gestured to the landscape, "it called to me." Emily studied him with interest. "You really love all this, don't you? The animals? The nature?" "They're my life," David answered without hesitation. Then, realizing how that sounded, he added, "But I missed you terribly, Em. Every day. You could have called more or visited." "I tried at first, a lot, but it was complicated with your mother, and then it seemed like you didn't want much contact either." Emily turned back to the window. "I was just a kid, Dad. I didn't know how to handle everything." They arrived at Mrs. Betty's retreat, a rustic but charming building on the way to Blue Ridge National Park. The owner, a 70-year-old woman with the energy of a teenager, stood at the entrance, visibly distressed. "Dr. Thompson, thank heavens. It's out back near the garden. My grandson Tommy found it when he went to pick lettuce for lunch. The poor thing is suffering." They followed Mrs. Betty to the back of the retreat, where a boy of about 12 crouched, near a small shelter made of branches and leaves, hastily put together to protect the animal. "Give us some space, please," David asked, stepping forward carefully. Inside the makeshift shelter, a young manned wolf pup, no more than 4 months old, trembled in fear. Its front paw was caught in a metal trap, clearly illegal. The bee. Same kind of trap that had likely injured the jaguar. David felt the anger rise again, but stayed focused. He opened his bag, prepared a syringe with a mild sedative appropriate for the animal's size, and looked at Emily. "Want to help me?" Her eyes widened. How? I need someone to hold its head while I administer the sedative. Usually Ruth does this, but since you're here and studying biology, Emily hesitated only a second before stepping closer and kneeling beside her father. Tell me what to do. For the next hour, David worked to remove the trap and treat the young animal's injuries, with Emily assisting at every step. He explained each procedure, each medication, and was impressed by his daughter's natural skill with the wild creature. You've got a knack for this, he remarked as they finished bandaging the maned wolf's paw. Emily smiled shyly. Guess it's in the blood. When they were done, David explained to Mrs. Betty that they'd need to take the young wolf to the clinic for recovery before releasing it in a safe area of the park. Thank goodness we have you around, Dr. Thompson, Mrs. Betty said admiringly. These little ones don't have anyone else to stand up for them. On the way back, with the sedated animal in the special compartment of the truck, Emily broke the silence. That trap. It's not the first one you've found, is it? David tightened his grip on the wheel. No, they've been appearing more often these past few months, ever since the resort project started moving forward. Uncle Gregory and Mom's project? David raised an eyebrow. Uncle Gregory? Emily shrugged. That's what Mom wants me to call him. But answer my question. Yes, their project, or rather Richard Blackwood's. Your Uncle Gregory is just the political figure making it all happen. And you're fighting them. It wasn't a question, and David didn't answer. Right away. Finally, he said, I'm fighting for what I believe is right. That area is a natural habitat for several endangered species. It can't become a luxury resort. Like the Jaguar you saved on the cliff. David slammed the brakes, nearly skidding, on the dirt road. How do you know about that? Emily smiled. Everyone in town's talking about it. The local hero who risked his life to save a Jaguar. Some say you're crazy. And what do you think? I think I'm finally starting to understand you, Dad. When they arrived at the clinic, Ruth greeted Emily with a warm smile. My goodness, how you've grown, sweetheart. You're beautiful. As David carried the young wolf inside, Ruth held Emily's arm. He missed you terribly, you know. He has your pictures all over his office. Even kept the school newspaper clippings your mum sent. Emily swallowed hard, staring at the door where her father had disappeared. He never told me that. Your father isn't great with words when it comes to feelings, but with animals, Ruth grinned. With them it's like he speaks another language. It's beautiful to see. Inside the treatment room, David worked on the young maned wolf when raised voices came from reception. Seconds later, the door swung open, and Richard Blackwood walked in, followed by two burly men in security uniforms. So this is where you hide what you steal from my land, Thompson? Richard said, pointing at the young wolf. David stepped between the businessman and the animal. This one was found on Mrs. Betty's property, not yours, and it was caught in an illegal trap, the same kind that's been appearing all around. Your future resort. Richard smirked arrogantly. What a coincidence. But I'm not here about the pup. I'm here for something bigger, much bigger. If it's the same offer as yesterday, my answer is still no. No, my dear friend. I came with a better offer. Richard looked around, noticing Emily standing by the door. Well, this must be your daughter. The resemblance is striking. Pleasure to meet you, Miss Thompson. I'm Richard Blackwood. Emily didn't extend her hand. I know who you are. My mother talks a lot about your project. Your mother is a visionary woman. She understands what progress means, unlike some people. Richard turned his attention to David. Your last report to the EPA about the local wildlife caused me some trouble, Thompson. You specifically mentioned the presence of jaguars in the Frontier Canyon area. Because they're there, they're native to the region. The problem, Richard continued as if David hadn't spoken, is that now I need a new environmental impact study, one that, let's say, doesn't emphasize the presence of endangered predators so much. And who better to do that study than the respected Dr. David Thompson? David laughed in disbelief. Are you asking me to falsify an environmental report? I'm asking you to be reasonable. Look, I know you love animals, and I admire that, truly. But development can't stop because of a handful of wildcats. Here's my proposal. You write a more balanced report, and I'll fund a wildlife sanctuary in another area. We could even name it after you. Emily stepped forward. A handful of wildcats? You're talking about an endangered species. Did you study biology by any chance? Richard seemed surprised by the young woman's intervention. With all due respect, miss, this is a matter for adults. My daughter is 18 and studying biology, David replied, a hint of pride in his voice, and she's absolutely right. What you're proposing is unethical and, more importantly, illegal. My answer is still no. Richard's smile vanished. You'll regret this, Thompson. I tried to be civil. He snapped his fingers at his security team and began to leave, but stopped at the door. By the way, I have men watching the entire frontier, canyon area now. If your pet Jaguar shows up there again, I can't guarantee its safety. When the door closed behind them, Emily turned to her father. Pet Jaguar, what's he talking about? David hesitated, torn between the truth and the absurdity of the situation. The Jaguar I rescued. Richard's just trying to intimidate me, that's all. Emily studied him for a long moment. Are you hiding something? It wasn't a question. Before David could answer, Ruth hurried in. Doctor, there's an urgent call. It's little Joe, the park guide. He said he found something you need to see, near the canyon. David felt his heart race. Something involving the canyon and an urgent call right after Richard's threatening visit couldn't be a coincidence. Emily, I have to go. You can stay here with Ruth or go home. There's a spare key in the reception drawer. I'm coming with you, Emily said firmly. It's not safe. From what I gather, you just made a powerful enemy, and you're my father. I'm coming with you. David looked at his daughter, seeing a determination that reminded him of his own. With a sigh, he nodded. All right, but stay close to me at all times. As they drove toward the Blue Ridge National Park, David couldn't stop thinking about the Jaguar. Had it returned to the canyon? Was it in danger? And what had little Joe found? What neither of them knew was that from that moment on, the lives of everyone involved would change forever, and one simple Jaguar would be the catalyst for it all. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, don't forget to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It helps us a lot as we're just starting out. Now continuing. David and Emily followed the road that wound around Blue Ridge National Park until they reached a small guard post where little Joe was waiting for them. Joseph Peters, known as Little Joe due to his short stature, was one of the park's most experienced guides. At 68, he knew every trail, every rock formation, every species that inhabited the region like the back of his weathered hand. Doctor, Thompson, glad you came quick, said little Joe, tipping his worn leather hat when he saw Emily. Pretty girl, your daughter? She's got your eyes. Yes, this is Emily, David confirmed quickly. What happened, Joe? The old guide glanced around, as if checking for eavesdroppers. Better to show than tell. Let's take the jeep. The spot's hard to reach. They climbed into the park's battered jeep with little Joe driving along a rugged trail that cut deeper into the Texas hill country. After about 20 minutes, he stopped the vehicle and pointed. From here we go on foot, about 200 yards that way. They walked in silence, little Joe leading the way. David noticed they were nearing the southern boundary of the park, close to the area Richard had claimed for his resort. Finally, little Joe stopped and gestured toward a small ravine. Down there, found it this morning during my rounds. David and Emily carefully approached the edge and looked down. What they saw made Emily cover her mouth in shock. At the bottom of the shallow ravine was a clearing where the vegetation had been freshly cleared. In its center, an excavator and other construction equipment sat idle. But what really caught their attention were the dozens of metal traps arranged in a circular pattern around the site. They're inside the park, David muttered, anger sharp in his voice. At least 500 yards past the official boundary. And those traps— It's worse, Doctor, little Joe interrupted, pointing to a specific spot. Look there. Beside the construction equipment stood a large cage, the kind used to transport big game. Next to it, a temporary shed bore Richard's company logo. They're hunting, David said. Not just clearing animals out of the way. They're actively hunting, probably for the black market. The Jaguar? Emily asked, connecting the dots quickly. David nodded grimly. An adult Jaguar could fetch millions on the black market, especially in Asia. Private collectors, traditional medicine. We have to stop them, Emily declared with a fierceness that surprised David. It's not that simple. We need concrete proof tying this directly to Richard, and we need the environmental authorities. I took photos with my phone yesterday, little Joe said. But when I called the regional EPA office, I was told the director was in a process review with the mayor's office. Funny coincidence, huh? Gregory, David murmured, referring to the mayor. He's covering for Richard. Suddenly, a low sound caught their attention, a soft growl from a nearby thicket. David signaled for everyone to freeze. Slowly, like a golden shadow, the Jaguar emerged from the brush. It was her, the same one David had saved, with the same wound on her paw, though it seemed to be healing well. The animal crept closer, eyes locked on David. My God, Emily whispered. It's really her, and she recognizes you. Little Joe instinctively took a step back. Doc, this isn't normal. A wild jaguar never approaches people like this. David stood perfectly still as the jaguar closed the distance, stopping just a few yards away. She paused, looked at Emily and little Joe, then back at David. Then, to everyone's complete astonishment, it lay down, as if demonstrating it posed no threat. She's asking for help, murmured David. Somehow she knows she's in danger. This is crazy, Dad, said Emily, though her voice held more awe than disbelief. I've lived my whole life in this park, remarked little Joe with reverence. Never seen anything like it. The old-timers used to say jaguars had souls that they could choose a human to protect. I thought it was just stories. The jaguar suddenly stood up, ears alert. A second later, they heard the distant sound of engines approaching. We have to get out of here, David said quickly. If they catch us, not only will we be in danger, but we'll lose any chance to gather legally valid evidence. As if understanding, the jaguar swiftly disappeared into the vegetation. The three ran back to the jeep, and little Joe drove along an alternate path, avoiding the main trail. Doc, this can't wait, little Joe said as he drove. I heard they're starting the main operation tomorrow, and with all that equipment already in place, we need authorities who aren't on Richard's payroll, David replied thoughtfully. And we need more evidence. Emily pulled out her phone. I recorded everything. The traps, the equipment, and the jaguar. She looked at her father. But I get what you mean, we need more. When they got back to the ranger station, David made a decision. Joe, do you know Mrs. Eleanor from the Old Town Residents Association? Little Joe smiled. Sure. Do, that woman's a force of nature, almost as old as the hills. Take us to her. 30 minutes later, they were at the headquarters of the Old Town Residents Association in Riverdale, a restored colonial two-story building in the town's historic center. Mrs. Eleanor Winters, an 82-year-old black woman, greeted them with the liveliness that had made her famous in the area. A former teacher at the town's only school for over 4 decades, she had educated generations of locals, including David in his childhood. My boy, she exclaimed when she saw David. And this must be your daughter. My, how she's grown. Last time I saw her, she was a fussy baby. Mrs. Eleanor, we need your help, David said after introductions. It's about Frontier Canyon. The woman's smile turned serious. Sit down, son. I think I know what this is about. I've been watching that businessman from New York City's moves for months. Over the next hour, David, with Emily and little Joe's help, explained everything they'd discovered. The illegal occupation inside the park, the traps, the possible poaching of protected species, and the political cover from the local government. This doesn't surprise me, Mrs. Eleanor said when they finished. What surprises me is that it took you all so long to notice. We old-timers have known for ages that area is special, not just for its natural beauty, but for its history. History? Emily asked, intrigued. Mrs. Eleanor rose with some effort and walked to an old filing cabinet in the corner of the room. From a dusty drawer, she pulled out a yellowed envelope. This has been kept safe for decades. The original park boundary documents from 1972. I was secretary of the commission that helped set the limits. She opened the envelope and spread the papers on the table. Look here, David. The Frontier Canyon area was included in the original park All of it. David examined the documents with growing excitement. But how is this possible? The current maps show the canyon outside park boundaries. Because in 1989 there was a revision of the boundaries, Mrs. Eleanor explained, making air quotes with her fingers, conveniently when certain folks had an interest in land around. Here, take Richard Blackwood's father, for example. Are you saying there was fraud in redefining the park boundaries? Asked David, incredulous. I'm saying I have the original maps, the original signatures and records of every meeting, replied Mrs. Eleanor with a sly smile. I kept everything because I knew it would be needed someday. This is incredible, murmured David. With these documents we can prove the land Richard is claiming is actually part of the national park, protected by federal law. But that doesn't explain the traps in that cage, Emily pointed out. Clearly they're doing something illegal beyond construction. That's where the next part of my plan comes in, said Mrs. Eleanor, her eyes gleaming like the energetic teacher she once was. The Old Town Residents Association has over 50 members, all above 65. We're invisible to people like Richard Blackwood. They look at us and see nothing but harmless old folks. What are you suggesting, Mrs. Eleanor? Asked David, uneasy about where this was heading. I'm suggesting that while you use official channels with these documents, we use our invisibility to gather more evidence about what's really happening in that warehouse. No, David said immediately. It's too dangerous. These people wouldn't hesitate to hurt even the elderly if they caught you spying. Who said anything about spying? Mrs. Eleanor smiled. I have another idea. Martha's granddaughter, my vice president, works for the catering company, serving the resort's launch cocktail party tomorrow night at the mayor's house, the event where all the major investors will be. Emily perked up. And we could get insider information? Exactly, confirmed Mrs. Eleanor. And not just that. The event decor is being handled by Sebastian's nephew, another association member. He's already agreed to place some listening devices in strategic spots. David stared at her with a mix of shock and admiration. Mrs. Eleanor, you sound more like a secret agent than a retired teacher. The old woman chuckled. My dear, when you reach my age, you realize sometimes justice has to be served by your own hands, or at least given a little nudge in the right direction. Recording people without consent is illegal, David warned. So is hunting endangered species, Mrs. Eleanor shot back. Besides, we won't be the ones using the recordings. We'll just hand them over anonymously to the right federal authorities, the ones not on Richard's payroll. Little Joe, who had stayed quiet, finally spoke. There's one more thing, Doc. I found more Jaguar tracks in the area. It's not just the one you saved. Looks like a family group, maybe cubs. David felt a chill. If there were cubs, it explained the protective behavior of the Jaguar he'd rescued and made the situation even more urgent. We need to act fast, he decided. Mrs. Eleanor, you handle the cocktail party operation. Little Joe, you monitor activity in Frontier Canyon without being seen. We need to know if they move equipment or step up hunting. You got it, Doc. I know that area like the back of my hand. They won't even spot me. What about us? Asked Emily, naturally including herself in the plan. David thought for a moment. We're going to the cocktail party. The cocktail party? Emily looked surprised. But isn't Richard your enemy now? Yes, but his mother doesn't know that, and we're officially invited, remember. The mayor is introducing you to local society. David smiled strategically. Besides, I want to see Richard's face when I show him I know exactly what he's up to. That night, as Emily slept, David went out to the porch of his house and gazed into the darkness of the Texas hill country. He was nearly ready to give up when he saw them, two golden points of light shining among the trees. The Jaguar had returned. You have cubs, don't you? David murmured into the darkness. That's why you came to me. You're protecting your family. As if in response, the Jaguar stepped forward into the faint light from the house. Behind her, half hidden in the shadows, two small cubs, no bigger than house cats, watched with curiosity. David felt a lump in his throat. Those little lives depended on his protection now. Just like the daughter sleeping inside, whom he barely knew but who had somehow unexpectedly become his ally. I promise I'll protect you, he whispered, to the Jaguar and her cubs, all of you. The next morning, David was woken by the sound of someone insistently knocking at his door. When he opened it, he found Jennifer, impeccably dressed and wearing a displeased expression. "Did you forget?" she asked without greeting. "Forget what?" "Breakfast with Gregory. You two were supposed to talk before tonight's cocktail party." David sighed. He'd completely forgotten. "Jennifer, now isn't a good time. I'm in the middle of work, as usual," she interrupted bitterly. "Some things never change, do they, David?" Emily appeared behind her father, still in her pajamas. "Mom, what are you doing here so early?" Jennifer seemed surprised to see her daughter so at ease in David's house. "I came to remind your father about breakfast with Gregory, which, apparently, he's no longer attending." "I can reschedule," David said. "Some urgent issues came up." "What kind of issues?" Jennifer asked, visibly irritated. David hesitated. Should he tell Jennifer what they'd discovered? She was engaged to Gregory, who was clearly involved in Richard's schemes. But on the other hand, Jennifer had always had a strong sense of justice, even when they disagreed on priorities. "Illegal encroachment in the park," he finally said. "Animal traps, possible hunting of endangered species. And your fiancé seems to be facilitating it all." Jennifer paled. "What are you talking about?" "Mom, it's true," Emily interjected. "We saw it with our own eyes. There's construction equipment inside the park, dozens of traps, and they're clearly hunting jaguars. And we have documents proving the land Richard claims for the resort is actually part of the national park," David added. "The revision of the boundaries in 1989 was fraudulent." Jennifer stepped inside, closing the door behind her. "This is absurd. Gregory wouldn't be involved in something like this. He has his flaws, but he's always respected the law." "Then why is the EPA director reviewing processes with the city council exactly when we need him?" David challenged. "Why have reports about illegal traps been systematically dismissed these past few months?" Jennifer sat down, looking genuinely disturbed. "I didn't know about this. Gregory assured me all the environmental studies were done, that the project had all the permits. And he never mentioned the fraudulent redrawing of the park boundaries?" David asked skeptically. "I didn't say he knew about it," Jennifer snapped defensively. Then more calmly she asked, "Where are these documents you mentioned?" "With Mrs. Eleanor from the Old Town Residents Association." "Eleanor Winters, my old teacher." Jennifer seemed surprised. "What does she have to do with this?" David briefly explained about the original park boundary records and how Mrs. Eleanor had preserved them all these years. "Let's go see her. Right now," Jennifer decided, standing up. "I want to see those documents with my own eyes." "You're not going to tell Gregory, are you?" asked Emily, worried. Jennifer looked at her daughter, hurt. "I wouldn't betray you like that, Emily, no matter what you might think of me." An hour later, the three were back at the Old Town Residents Association headquarters. Mrs. Eleanor didn't seem surprised to see Jennifer. "I knew you'd come, my dear," the elderly woman said, embracing her former student. "You were always too smart to be fooled for long." Jennifer carefully examined the documents, using the legal knowledge she'd gained from years working as a legal advisor. "These documents are legitimate," she finally concluded, "and devastating for the resort project. But more than that, they're evidence of fraud and corruption spanning decades. The question is, what will you do with this information?" asked David, watching his ex-wife carefully. Jennifer lifted her eyes from the papers, her face set in a mask of determination that David recognized well from their marriage. "I'll do what's right. I always have, even when we disagreed on what that meant." She paused. "But first, I need to talk to Gregory. He deserves to know before this goes public." "What if he's part of the scheme?" Emily questioned. "What if he warns Richard?" "Then I'll know exactly where I stand," Jennifer replied, "and who I'm marrying." David and Emily exchanged worried glances, but respected Jennifer's decision. After she left, promising to meet them at the cocktail party that evening, Mrs. Eleanor smiled at them. "Your ex-wife has always had a strong moral compass, David. Just different paths than yours. I hope you're right, Mrs. Eleanor, because we've just put all our cards on the table." That afternoon, as David and Emily prepared for the cocktail party, they got an urgent call from little Joe. "Doc, they're moving the equipment and more people are arriving at the warehouse. I think they're planning something big tonight, while everyone's distracted by the party. We need more help, David decided, hanging up. More eyes on Frontier Canyon. Who? Emily asked, concerned. We can't trust the local authorities, and there's no time to bring in outsiders. David thought for a moment, then smiled. I know exactly the right people for the job. 2 hours later, David had gathered an unlikely group. Besides little Joe, there was Mrs. Betty from the inn, her grandson Tommy, 3 retired park guides, and a team of 5 biologists David knew from the Federal University who, coincidentally, were in the area conducting research. Split into pairs, David instructed. Keep a safe distance, photograph and film everything, but don't intervene, no matter what you see. If you notice illegal activity, like animal trapping, alert the group immediately. Does everyone have the emergency contact numbers I gave? You? The group nodded. David noticed that despite the tense situation, there was a positive energy in the air. Ordinary people united for a just cause, willing to protect what they loved. And remember, he added, keep an eye out for any sign of the Jaguar cubs. They're extremely vulnerable and likely hidden somewhere within the canyon perimeter. As the group dispersed to their assigned positions, Emily approached her father. You really care, don't you, about all of this? It wasn't a question, but an observation. I always have, David replied simply. Maybe too much sometimes. Emily studied her father for a moment. When I was little, I hated when you'd leave to save animals. I felt like they were more important to you than I was. She paused. But now I understand. You weren't choosing them over me. You were just being you. And that's a good thing. David felt a lump in his throat. Before he could answer, his phone rang. It was Jennifer. David, we need to talk before the cocktail party, she said, her voice tense. Meet me at the gazebo in the town square in 15 minutes. It's important. The urgency in Jennifer's voice worried David. What happened? Did you talk to Gregory? 15 minutes, David, and come alone. She hung up. David looked at Emily, concerned. Your mother wants to meet me before the party. That doesn't sound good, Emily remarked. Do you want me to come with you? She asked me to come alone. David hesitated. But be ready. I'll call you if anything happens. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel. It really helps those of us just starting out. Now back to the story. The town square in Riverdale was a small, well-kept park in the center of town, with a white gazebo in the middle, surrounded by dogwoods and blackberry trees. When he arrived, David saw Jennifer already waiting, looking anxious and uneasy. What's going on? He asked as he approached. Jennifer glanced around as if checking for eavesdroppers. I spoke to Gregory. I showed him copies of Mrs. Eleanor's documents. And? He claimed he didn't know about the fraudulent redefinition, swore it was all Richard's idea, and that he only supported the project because he believed in the economic benefits for the town. Jennifer paused. But when I mentioned the traps and the possible illegal hunting, he got strange, evasive, said I was being manipulated by you. David felt his anger rising again. And you believed him? I didn't say I believed him, Jennifer snapped. I'm telling you what happened. Sorry, go on. After I left his office, I saw Gregory making a hurried call. I pretended I'd forgotten my purse and went back. Jennifer swallowed hard. He was talking to Richard. I heard him say, Thompson knows everything, and that they need to move up the operation to tonight. David paled. Operation? He used that word? Yes, and more. He said they need to clear the canyon before the buyers arrive. My God, David murmured. They're going after the Jaguars tonight, while everyone's distracted at the party. There's more, Jennifer continued, visibly shaken. I heard Gregory mention something about the marked Jaguar and her cubs. They're tracking a specific animal, David. The Jaguar you saved. She had a distinctive mark on her front paw from the injury. They've been hunting her specifically. Jennifer, this is... David searched for words. Thank you for telling me. I know it couldn't have been easy. It wasn't, she admitted. I'm ending my engagement tonight. In the middle of the party if I have to. Her eyes shone with determination. I may have made mistakes, David, including putting my career above our family, but I'd never be part of something like this. David nodded, acknowledging both the confession and her resolve. We need to warn the others and move up our plans too. Our plans? Jennifer raised an eyebrow. You're not alone in this fight, are you? David smiled faintly. Let's just say some townspeople care as much as I do about what happens in the park. Jennifer returned the smile, the first genuine one she'd given David in years. You always could rally people to your causes, David. They left the gazebo. Together, a silent truce forming between ex-husband and ex-wife, reunited by a greater purpose. When he got home, David found Emily already dressed for the party. Wearing a simple but elegant dress Jennifer must have brought her from New York City. What happened? She asked immediately. David quickly explained his conversation with Jennifer and what they'd uncovered about the plans for that night. So they're going to attack today, Emily summarized, while everyone's distracted by the party. Exactly, and our team at the canyon needs to be ready. David sent an urgent message to the group, warning them about the operation planned for that night. Then he began getting ready for the cocktail party himself, though his mind was miles away, on the rocky slopes of Frontier Canyon, with the Jaguar and her cubs. As he dressed, an idea began forming in his mind. A risky one, possibly dangerous, but it might be the only way to protect the Jaguar and expose Richard and Gregory's schemes once and for all. Emily, he called, stepping out of the bedroom. How good is your phone's camera? The young woman raised an eyebrow, confused. Pretty good. It records in 4K. Why? Because we need undeniable evidence, and I think I know exactly how to get it. The mayor's official residence in Riverdale was a restored colonial mansion perched on the town's highest point. From there, you could see the entire valley and, in the distance, the mountains of Blue Ridge National Park. That night, the house was festively lit, with luxury cars lining the cobblestone street. David parked his worn-out truck at a discreet distance and glanced at Emily, who looked nervous. Remember the plan? She nodded. Act natural, socialize, observe. Record any suspicious conversations, especially if Richard or the mayor are talking. And your mother. I'll support her however she needs. Emily paused. Is she really calling? Off the engagement tonight. That's what she said. I know your mother, Em. Once she makes a decision, she follows through. They entered the mansion and were greeted by a butler, who led them to the main hall. The room was filled with local and regional elite, businessmen, politicians, ranchers, all dressed elegantly, chatting in small groups with champagne glasses in hand. In the background, a string quartet played soft music. David Thompson? Richard Blackwood's voice rang out nearby. The businessman approached, dressed in an impeccable Italian suit, a false smile on his lips. And this must be the famous Emily. Charmed, miss, your father talks about you often. Doubtful, Emily replied dryly, considering your opponents. Richard laughed as if it were a harmless joke. Opponents? That's an exaggeration. Your father and I just have differing opinions on the best path for the region's development. That's all. Differences that include illegally trespassing in a national park and setting traps for endangered animals, David countered, keeping his voice low but firm. Richard's smile faltered for a moment. I don't know what you're talking about, Thompson, but this isn't the place for that conversation. He gestured to the room. We're here to celebrate Riverdale's future. The Royal Frontier Lodge will transform this town, bring prosperity to everyone. To everyone or just you and your investors? David challenged. Before Richard could respond, Mayor Gregory Williams stepped onto a small makeshift podium in the center of the hall. Tall, with graying hair and an athletic build for his 50 years, he wore the confident smile of a seasoned politician. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to my home on this special evening, his voice boomed, quieting the chatter. Tonight, we celebrate not only the official launch of the Royal Frontier Lodge, a project that will transform our beloved Riverdale. As Gregory spoke, David scanned the room for Jennifer. He finally spotted her to the right of the podium, her tense expression contrasting with her elegant navy blue dress. But I also want to take this moment to officially introduce you all to my fiancée, Jennifer Parker. A polite round of applause rippled through the hall. Jennifer stepped onto the podium, visibly uncomfortable but maintaining a composed demeanor. "Thank you, Gregory," she said, pausing as she looked directly at where David and Emily were standing. "And thank you all for being here tonight. This is an occasion that will certainly be remembered for a long time." David noticed the hesitation in her voice, the double meaning in her words. Jennifer was preparing for something. Gregory took back the microphone. "And now it's my pleasure to call to the stage the visionary behind the Royal Frontier Lodge, my friend and partner, Richard Blackwood." Richard strode confidently to the podium, his smile wider than ever. "Thank you, Mayor. Good evening, everyone. It's with immense satisfaction that I officially present the project that will transform not just Riverdale, but the entire Blue Ridge region." As Richard began his presentation, showcasing stunning images of the future lodge on a large screen, David received a message from Little Joe. "Doc, heavy activity in the canyon. 3 trucks and a van just arrived. Armed men." David discreetly showed the message to Emily, whose eyes widened with concern. "Respecting, of course, all environmental regulations," Richard continued. "Our project was designed to coexist harmoniously with the lush nature of Blue Ridge. Every cabin, every trail, every facility was planned to minimize environmental impact." "Lies!" The strong voice of Mrs. Eleanor rang out from the back of the room. Everyone turned, surprised. The elderly woman marched decisively down the aisle, followed by several members of the Old Town Residents Association, all dressed elegantly for the occasion, but with stern expressions. "Mrs. Eleanor, please," Gregory intervened, trying to control the situation. "This isn't the time for—" "This is exactly the time, Gregory Williams," the elderly woman interrupted, her voice surprisingly powerful for someone her age. "Before you and your partner deceive all these good people." A murmur spread through the room. Richard smiled, trying to appear condescending. "Ma'am, I respect your age and your position in the community, but clearly there's a misunderstanding here." "There's no misunderstanding," Mrs. Eleanor shot back, reaching the foot of the podium. "What we have here is fraud, trespassing, on a national park, and illegal hunting of endangered species." The murmur turned into gasps of surprise. David saw Jennifer quietly step down from the podium and stand beside Mrs. Eleanor. "I have here with me," the elderly woman continued, holding up a folder, "the original documents marking the boundaries of Blue Ridge National Park, which prove that the area where you're building the lodge is actually protected land. The 1989 boundary redefinition was fraudulent." Gregory stepped forward, trying to regain control. "Mrs. Eleanor, these are very serious accusations. If you have documents, the proper procedure would be to present them to the appropriate authorities, not disrupt a social event like this." "The appropriate authorities, Gregory," Jennifer interjected, to everyone's surprise. "Like the EPA director you've conveniently kept busy with paperwork reviews at City Hall for weeks?" Gregory paled, staring at his fiancée in disbelief. "Jennifer, what are you doing?" "What's right, Gregory? What I've always done." She turned to the crowd. "As legal counsel, I've reviewed the documents Mrs. Eleanor has. They're authentic and completely invalidate Mr. Blackwood's territorial claims in Frontier Canyon." David seized the moment of confusion to approach the podium. "And that's not all," he said loudly enough for everyone to hear. "Right now, an illegal operation is underway in the canyon. Armed men hired by Mr. Blackwood with the mayor's complicity are hunting Jaguars for sale on the black market." The statement provoked shocked exclamations. Richard completely dropped his friendly facade. "That's slander," he exclaimed furiously. "I'll sue you for defamation, Thompson." "I have proof," David countered calmly, "including testimony from several citizens who are currently documenting the illegal operation." David's phone vibrated again. Another message from Little Joe. "They're surrounding a cave area. We believe the Jaguar and cubs are inside." David felt his heart race. Time was running out. At that moment, Emily stepped forward, holding up her phone. "And we have more evidence," she announced, with a confidence that filled David with pride. "Recordings from this morning in the mayor's office where he and Mr. Blackwood explicitly discussed the operation, to capture and smuggle the Jaguars before the federal inspection scheduled for next week. This was the risky part of the plan. They didn't actually have those recordings, but they needed to buy time and force Richard and Gregory to reveal their true intentions. The strategy worked. Gregory, completely rattled, looked at Richard in panic. "You said the office was secure, that no one could be listening." "Shut your mouth, you idiot," Richard hissed, but it was too late. A deathly silence fell over the room. The mayor's involuntary confession confirmed all the accusations. Jennifer, who knew it was a bluff, looked at David with a mix of admiration and surprise at the tactic's effectiveness. "This is outrageous," Richard tried again. "I won't stand here and be slandered." He made a move to leave, but was stopped by two men David didn't recognize. "Federal agents, Mr. Blackwood," one said, flashing a badge. "You're coming with us for questioning." It was then David realized, stunned, that several of the ordinary guests were actually undercover federal agents. Jennifer smiled at him. "I called an old college friend who works for the FBI this afternoon. I thought we might need official backup." As Richard and Gregory were discreetly escorted out, to the shock of the remaining guests, David got another message from Little Joe. "They're entering the caves now, at least 6 armed men. We need help." "Jennifer, the men at the canyon are still there," David said urgently. "The federal agents need to get there immediately." Jennifer nodded and went to speak with the agent in charge. Meanwhile, Emily approached her father. "I need to go to the canyon," David said firmly. "The Jaguar and cubs are in immediate danger." "I'm coming with you," Emily declared without hesitation. "It's too dangerous. Dad, we're in this together, and you'll need all the help you can get." David looked at his daughter, seeing not just Jennifer's determination, but also his own passion for wildlife preservation in her. He nodded, accepting that his now-grown daughter had the right to make her own choices. Minutes later, they were in David's truck, speeding down the road toward the national park, followed by 2 FBI vehicles. The sun was beginning to set, painting the Texas hill country in shades of orange and red. "How will we find them? The canyon is a huge area," Emily asked, gripping her seat as David drove fast over the rough road. "Little Joe is guiding us, and—" David hesitated for a moment. "I think I know exactly where the Jaguar is hiding with her cubs." "How?" "It's hard to explain. A connection. Ever since I saved her, it's like I can sense her presence, like she's calling to me." Emily looked at her father with an expression mixing skepticism and admiration. "That sounds crazy, Dad." "I know," David said with a brief smile. "But some of the most important things in life seem crazy at first glance." They reached the park entrance and took a side trail David knew well. They left their vehicles, where the vegetation became too dense, and continued on foot, guided by Little Joe's texted directions. Frontier Canyon emerged ahead, majestic and mysterious in the twilight. Its red sandstone walls rose over 100 feet high, with shadows that seemed to dance along the rocky crevices. "There," whispered David, pointing to a darker area on the slope. "That cluster of smaller caves." They approached cautiously, accompanied by 4 federal agents who had insisted on leading the operation. In the distance, they could see flashlight beams moving at the entrance of one of the larger caves. "They're already inside," murmured one of the agents. "We'll need to be careful. Firearms in an environment like this could cause dangerous ricochets." At that moment, David felt something strange, a presence. He turned slowly and saw it. The Jaguar, the same one he had saved, was just a few yards away, hidden in the shadow of a bush, watching them intently. "Dad!" whispered Emily, gripping David's arm. "Don't move," he instructed, though he instinctively knew the animal meant no harm. "She won't attack us." As if to confirm his words, the Jaguar took a few steps forward, her eyes locked on David. There was something in her behavior, an urgency, a silent plea. "The cubs," David murmured in realization. "They're not in the cave where those men are searching." The Jaguar turned and began to walk away, glancing back as if expecting them to follow. "She wants us to follow her," David said, disbelieving even as the evidence was right in front of him. "That's impossible," protested one of the agents. "Wild jaguars don't act like this. "This one does," Emily replied, fascinated by the animal's behavior. "Dad, I think we should follow her." David didn't hesitate any longer. He started after the Jaguar, with Emily close behind. The agents exchanged uncertain glances, but two of them decided to follow while the other two continued toward the cave where the hunters were. The Jaguar led them along an almost invisible trail, climbing up a side slope of the canyon. The path was steep and difficult, but the animal seemed to know exactly where to step, occasionally looking back as if checking they were still following. Finally, they reached a small recess in the rock wall, nearly hidden by bushes. The Jaguar slipped inside and disappeared into the darkness. "She's in there," David said, pointing to the narrow entrance. "With the cubs." "How can you be sure?" asked one of the agents skeptically. Before David could answer, they heard it, tiny mewling sounds from inside the cave, the unmistakable sound of feline cubs. "This is it," David confirmed, his voice thick with emotion. "They're here." Carefully, David moved toward the entrance. Pulling a small flashlight from his pocket, he shone a gentle light inside. The Jaguar lay at the back, and beside her were 3 small cubs, no more than 2 months old, their eyes reflecting the light like tiny golden coins. "My goodness," Emily whispered, peering over her father's shoulder. "They're beautiful." Just then they heard raised voices, followed by arrest orders being shouted. The confrontation in the other cave had begun. "The agents are arresting the hunters," said one of the officers with them. "We need to make sure no one finds this cave in the chaos." David nodded, positioning himself protectively at the entrance of the small cave. The Jaguar watched him with trust, as if she knew he wouldn't let anything happen to her or her cubs. The operation lasted about an hour. When everything finally settled down, David received the news that 6 poachers had been arrested, along with all the equipment used, for capturing and transporting wild animals. Documents found with them proved their connection to Richard and Gregory, and pointed to an international buyer waiting for the Jaguars in New York City. "What happens now?" asked Emily, watching the cubs play carelessly, unaware of the danger they had faced. "Now." David paused, looking at the Jaguar, who returned his gaze with that strange intelligence. "Now they stay where they belong, in their home, and we make sure they remain protected." A week later, David, Emily, and Jennifer were gathered on David's porch, watching the sunset over the Texas hill country. News of the illegal hunting operation, the fraud involving the park's boundaries, and the corruption scandal involving the mayor and a powerful businessman had spread quickly, making national headlines. Richard and Gregory were in custody while investigations continued. The resort project had been officially cancelled, and the Frontier Canyon area had been formally reintegrated into Blue Ridge National Park, with Mrs. Eleanor's original document serving as the legal basis for the decision. "I still can't believe everything worked out," Emily remarked, taking a sip of coffee. "It worked out because the right people came together for the right cause," replied Jennifer, who seemed more relaxed than David had seen her in years. Freed from the weight of her engagement to Gregory and her unwitting involvement in a corrupt scheme, she had rediscovered some of her old cheerfulness. "And the Jaguar?" she asked. "Any news?" David smiled. "The EPA set up discreet cameras in the area. She and the cubs are doing well, adapting perfectly. Safe." "I still find it amazing that she came to you like that," Emily said, "as if she knew you could help." "Some bonds go beyond the barriers between species," David said simply. "Sometimes when we save something or someone, we create a connection that lasts forever." Jennifer watched him with a thoughtful expression. "You've always been like that, David, able to see beyond the obvious, to feel things others don't." She paused. "That's what made you such a great veterinarian and conservationist, and a father who loves deeply, even when he doesn't know how to say it." David looked at Jennifer, surprised by her words, then at Emily, who smiled with tears in her eyes. "Thank you for saying that, Jennifer. It's the truth." She took a deep breath. "I'm staying in Riverdale, you know. I accepted the position as coordinator for the new Regional Environmental Protection Office the state government is opening here after all this scandal." "That's wonderful," David exclaimed, genuinely happy for his ex-wife. "And I," Emily chimed in, "was thinking about doing my internship here at the park. If my dad can guide me, of course." David felt a lump in his throat. "Nothing would make me happier, Em." Just then they all heard a soft sound coming from the edge of the property's vegetation. Turning slowly, they saw her, the Jaguar, majestic. In the twilight, her cubs playing happily around her. "She came to say goodbye," David murmured. "Or to thank us," Emily suggested. Jennifer, who had never seen the Jaguar before, was speechless with awe. The big cat looked directly at David, her golden eyes reflecting the last light of the day. In that gaze was an understanding beyond words, a connection that defied explanation. Then, as quietly as she had appeared, the Jaguar gathered her cubs and vanished into the wild, returning to the life that was rightfully hers. David knew he would see her again from time to time, always at a distance, always free. A living reminder that when we save something precious, whether it's an animal, a relationship, or an entire ecosystem, something inside us is saved too. The end of the story. And you, what would you do if you encountered a wild animal in danger? Could you risk everything to save it? Tell us in the comments what you thought of this story of connection between man and nature. Don't forget to leave your like, share it with others who love uplifting stories, and most importantly, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss our next heartwarming tales.